Hello, Grace Covenant. It's Thursday, January 28th, and this is your GCPC Daily Devotional. So I want to start with some breaths, just so we can listen and be present in this devotional together with our bodies, not just with our minds. So I hope you can kind of sink into your body and how you feel. I have a little rock that I'm holding on to, just something solid and visceral that I can feel. And let's all just take a few deep breaths together and let that oxygen, let those breaths go way down deep. Just kind of imagine them going all the way down to your toes and the tips of your fingers. And let's breathe in together through your nose and out through your mouth. And on this breath, let's really attend to where it's coming from. You want these breaths to come from deep in your abdomen and empty from there too, not just shallow chest breath, but deep breath. So one more together. You might even want to put your hand on your abdomen and feel it expand and contract. Breathe in. And out. And remember, you have that breath and you have that visceral solidity of your body to hold you as we explore together. So there's so much going on. Everybody knows that. And I'm speaking to and from the formation that has been mine, and that is Presbyterian, which is a very intellectual tradition. We like to study things. We like to read things. We like to rationalize things. We like to think through things. We like to, and we discern. We discern generally with our minds. But there are other ways to discern, and especially when it comes to the deep woundedness that we're dealing with in our country around race, and particularly around the way white supremacy culture inhabits bodies and relationships and families and systems and structures. So you don't solve a cellular, muscular tissue in your body problem with thinking. So that's why I invite you to keep breathing. And, 2010, my book, Let the Bones Dance, was published. And that was after several years of my own work around embodiment. And that wasn't just a thinking, that was a being, that was a sinking down into the body where I explored all kinds of things, and it was hard, it was painful, but it was necessary. And that was my own healing journey around sexual violence. And that involved massage, that involved yoga, that involved breath work, that involved energy work, that involved a circle of support of body workers and energy tenders, people who could come alongside me and really help me notice and listen to my body. On Tuesday, the Grace Covenant staff went to an online learning opportunity with Resma Menachem, the author of My Grandmother's Hands. I hope if you have not already explored that book that you will, because that book is about racialized trauma in the body. And he differentiates around how that trauma takes up residence in white bodies and in Black and brown and indigenous bodies. And there were some really important things that that kind of brought me up around kind of, yes, I know that, but I've gotten away from it. He talked about how white-bodied supremacy has habituated this kind of override switch when trauma happens, that instead of acknowledging the trauma, instead of, tending to the body in the wake of trauma, white body supremacy teaches us to override it and to dress ourselves up and dust ourselves off and still be professional and still act like everything's okay. And we saw the United States Congress do that when after the insurrection they came back and did work instead of really acknowledging what had just happened, which was very traumatic. And it was violent and it was terrifying and it was, and it's not resolved. And so, what would it look like for us to disrupt that habit that comes from trauma itself, to override the pain, to override what's just happened and act like everything's okay? And it set me to feeling my way back into some of the learning that I did and in my body back when I was deep into the work around my own trauma around sexual violence. And one of the things he said was really, really important, and that is that either way, this is painful. And he differentiates dirty pain and clean pain. I might choose some other words, but I'm going to go with his because I think they're very instructive. And dirty pain is the pain that you have to endure and that you hold and that you deal with when you're not acknowledging the trauma. In other words, the pain that it takes to try to override the trauma, what I call in Let the Bones Dance a survival switch. You don't avoid pain that way. It just it's just different. Clean pain for him is the pain that has healing purpose. I like to think of it like labor pains. It's pain that has promise and purpose, that brings us into a more healing space. And so Menachem says, let's not try to just stay in our minds. Let's sink down into our bodies and inquire together, explore together, what about white body supremacy breaks bones, as he puts it, constricts, limits, ruptures. And I see that, I feel that in my own formation in the Presbyterian Church. And that's why I wrote my book, is really to call the church into a more embodied truthfulness and mode of healing. And that's why we did things like embodied prayers of confession and other breath work and other kind of disruptions of our idolatry of the mind in the Presbyterian Church. That's why we did those things. And some of you embraced it and some of you kind of braced yourselves. And I'll end with another really profound embodied wisdom that Menachem evoked on Tuesday, and that is the metric that he uses, the embodied metric that he uses to explore historical trauma, intergenerational trauma, persistent and institutional trauma, and personal trauma. And that is um, what did my mother recoil from? What did my dad lean into? Exploring those visceral rememberings that we have in our body about what recoiled our mothers and our grandmothers and our great grandmothers and our aunties, and what did our fathers, our grandfathers, our great grandfathers, our uncles lean into. And I'm exploring that, and I'm feeling that, especially as I inhabit a family in crisis with my mother's health issues. There is so much there that hurts and that is ready for healing. And I know the more that I do that as a woman, her name was Stephanie, and she works with teachers, and she was a part of the learning experience there with Resma Menachem, and she talked about me search, that you have to do the me search before you do the research. And I think that's also something that white dominant systems push against, is the me search. Doing the me search to explore kind of the family habits, how trauma turns into, kind of family habits and personalities and cultures around physical pain. And I see how hard physical pain is for my family to really deal with and process, and for it to really sink in that we're in a crisis and that something's not working and that we're not really taking care of each other in some way, in the ways that we need to. And it's heartbreaking when you're in that and you don't know how to get out of it. So let's take a breath again together. And remember that we are a white dominant collective, and by that I mean Grace Covenant is a community formed in white ways, inhabited by mostly white people. Not all of us are white, but many of us are. And so this is a space where this work could truly be impactful if we can be together in new ways, if we can tend to the trauma that has become culture, the trauma that has become personality, the trauma that has become family systems. If we can tend to that together, tenderly, courageously, honestly, with humility, with vulnerability, and with love, that we're doing work on behalf of a larger culture that could change things, that could shift things, that could allow us to be more at home with each other and with ourselves. And that, my siblings at Grace Covenant, that is what the world needs from us. That is what the world needs from us, for us to find a way to tend to the trauma that became culture a long time ago, and to tend to it together in healing ways, in ways that truly help some of that constriction, some of that brokenness, to loosen, to become more supple, and ultimately to heal. Blessings to you, Grace Covenant. I know that was a lot. What I'm going to do now is go outside and feel my feet on the ground and breathe, and I'm going to just imagine ourselves, all of us, breathing together, um, and grounding ourselves together. I love you. I'm sending love, and I'm holding you close.